Search him now! Charlotte Whitmore's words weren't spoken. They were fired sharp, merciless, echoing under the chandeliers like a commandment. The crowd froze, crystal glasses suspended mid-air. And then louder, "My ring is gone! Check his pocket!" Her finger pointed like a weapon at Darius Cole, the only black man standing at the center of the Whitmore family's ballroom. In that instant, the celebration of a $900 million deal turned into an interrogation. The violins stopped mid-bow, the laughter died, and every guest leaned forward as if justice or spectacle was about to be served. Darius didn't move. His frame was steady, his gaze unreadable. The polished oak floor beneath his shoes might as well have been stone. He was the picture of calm inside a storm built from centuries of entitlement. Charlotte advanced, pearl gown catching the chandelier's glow, tiara gleaming like a crown on trial. "Don't just stand there," she snapped at the nearest security officer. "Do it. He has it. People like him don't belong here." That phrase, "people like him," cut deeper than the accusation. A ripple of discomfort spread through the room. A young server froze with his tray trembling, champagne flutes rattling like a warning. From the back, a guest raised a phone, the red record light burning in the dim. Gregory Whitmore, patriarch and self-anointed emperor, rose from the head table. His voice thundered, "Our family built empires. We will not tolerate thieves at our table. Officer, act now." The ballroom shifted. What had been gold and white elegance seconds earlier now felt cold, sterile, like a courtroom flooded with bias instead of truth. The officer stepped forward, his hand hovering inches from Darius's lapel. The crowd collectively held its breath, waiting for the humiliation to be sealed. But Darius? He inhaled once slow, deliberate. Silence, not defense. Patience, not fear. He'd been here before. At 24, denied a lease because the income didn't look right. At 32, dismissed from a boardroom before he could even speak. Now, at 38, standing in the very ballroom he had bankrolled, he was accused of being a thief. Before we continue, where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you believe in dignity and justice, hit like and subscribe. These stories spark change. And we're glad you're here. Now, back to Darius. Charlotte's tiara tilted as she leaned forward, eyes locked on him, fury unchecked. "Search him. Do it now." And the storm had officially begun. Darius Cole hadn't chosen his suit by accident. Black wool, slim cut, pressed to perfection, elegant, but quiet. No flashy watch, no designer lapel pin, no entourage shadowing him. To anyone else, he looked like another well-dressed guest, maybe a distant +1 tagging along. That was intentional. He wanted to see how they treated the man they didn't recognize. The Whitmore family didn't disappoint. Charlotte's voice still sliced through the ballroom, dripping with entitlement. "I knew it. He doesn't belong." Her words echoed across the gold and white walls, bouncing off crystal glassware that moments earlier had toasted to empire and wealth. A young woman near the back, an investor from Singapore, tilted her head, squinting. Her whisper brushed past the hum of panic. "Wait, isn't that Darius Cole?" Her companion frowned, unsure. The server with trembling hands adjusted his tray, eyes flicking between the guests and the accused. He didn't know who the man was, but something in the CEO's stillness told him this wasn't a thief. This was someone who had weathered storms bigger than a ballroom scandal. Gregory Whitmore leaned forward, his silver hair gleaming under the chandelier. "Officer," he barked, "you hesitate, you lose control. Do your job. Search him." The officer shifted uncomfortably, the weight of the command pressing harder than his own badge. His hand lingered inches from Darius's lapel. The room was waiting for him to act, as though humiliation could erase doubt. Darius's silence carried heavier than words. He remembered the looks at 24 when a leasing agent told him, "Your kind doesn't usually qualify." He remembered 32 when his ideas were dismissed before he even opened his mouth. He had worn this silence before, not as surrender, but as armor. The ballroom air thickened, ripe with whispers, judgment, and the unspoken assumption that wealth wore only one color. The chandelier's glow, meant to crown the evening in opulence, now lit up prejudice for all to see. A woman in a blush gown tugged her husband's sleeve. "This feels wrong," she murmured. Another guest shook his head but stayed quiet, complicit in silence. Through it all, Darius stood unshaken, the polished oak floor reflecting his figure like a shadow that would not move. He didn't need to fight their words. Not yet. He had something more devastating patience sharpened into a weapon. And in that silence, the storm pressed closer. The murmur in the ballroom swelled into a low hum, a collective pulse of suspicion and spectacle. Gregory Whitmore raised his glass not to toast, but to command silence. His words landed heavy. This family has entertained royalty, presidents, kings. We do not welcome thieves into our house. The sentence carried the arrogance of empire, as if lineage alone gave him authority to define truth. Several guests nodded in shallow agreement, unwilling to cross him. Charlotte's smirk widened. She stepped closer, eyes blazing with triumph. Check him. Do it in front of everyone. He probably slipped it into his pocket when I walked past. Her accusation felt rehearsed, practiced cruelty in designer heels. The officer glanced at Gregory, then back to Darius. His hand hovered again, but his hesitation showed cracks. A few guests exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the imbalance between accusation and evidence. Then Edward Whitmore, Charlotte's older brother, cut through the air with a sneer. Look at him, standing there like he owns the place. I've seen this before. Pretenders, con artists. They get in, they charm someone, then they rob them blind. The jab drew laughter from two men near the bar. Shallow, nervous laughter that masked the fear of wealth being touched by hands they didn't recognize. Darius's expression didn't change. His stillness, his refusal to flinch, only seemed to inflame them more. From the back, the young investor who had whispered his name earlier leaned forward. Her voice, quiet but steady, slipped into the tension. That's Darius Cole. I've seen him on Forbes, that's him. The words rippled through the crowd like a dropped glass. Some dismissed it impossible. Others looked again, eyes narrowing, suspicion turning into doubt. Gregory's jaw tightened. Rumors, nothing more. Don't be fooled by whispers. Officer, act. But the officer shifted again, sweat beating at his temple. Something in Darius's eyes, in the weight of his calm, made compliance feel dangerous. The ballroom wasn't celebrating anymore. It was watching a trial unfold without evidence, judgment delivered by pedigree instead of fact. Charlotte leaned in, her voice dripping venom. Why are you silent? Guilty men don't speak. For the first time, Darius moved just slightly. His head tilted, eyes locking on hers with quiet precision. His silence didn't read as guilt. It read as power, stored and waiting. The guests could feel it now. The Whitmores hadn't cornered a thief. They had provoked something far greater, and the room braced for what would come next. The officer's hand hovered, trembling now, caught between duty and doubt. The ballroom's glow dimmed in spirit, if not in light. Every chandelier spark felt like a spotlight, pressing judgment onto one man who hadn't spoken a word. Darius Cole stood perfectly still, shoulders square, chin level, eyes steady. He was not refusing, he was enduring. Silence had always been his sharpest blade. Charlotte mistook it for weakness. She leaned closer, her perfume cloying in the air. Say something, she taunted, her voice loud enough to carry. Admit what you did. Guilty men stay quiet because they know the truth. Darius didn't blink. His silence was a wall she couldn't climb. Edward, restless beside her, scoffed. Look at him, that smug calm. He's trying to play us. I've seen this game before. He stepped toward the officer. Do it. Search him. End this circus. Gregory's command followed, deep and resonant. If you hesitate, officer, you insult this family. Remove the doubt. Now. But the officer froze. His eyes flicked from Gregory's hardened stare to Darius's unshaken presence. The weight of choice pressed on him like an anvil. Around them, the crowd grew louder, restless, torn between siding with power and recognizing injustice. From the back, the young investor spoke again, louder this time. I'm telling you, that's Darius Cole. I saw his face in Forbes. He's not who you think he island. Her voice cracked the tension like a fissure through marble. Some guests gasped, others frowned, unwilling to believe. Charlotte spun toward her, her tiara catching the light like a blade. Don't you dare spread lies in this room. He's no one. The investor didn't back down. No one stands that still unless they know the truth will speak for them. A murmur swept the ballroom. Questions. Doubt. The narrative was slipping from Whitmore control. And still Darius said nothing. He remembered 26, when a banker refused his loan even with triple collateral. He remembered 30, when a hotel clerk told him, "You don't look like a penthouse guest." Each silence then had cut deep. Each silence now was steel, forged from years of prejudice turned into patience. His stillness unnerved them. It wasn't the quiet of surrender, it was the calm of a storm deciding where to land. Charlotte's voice rose to a shriek, her composure unraveling. Why is no one doing anything? He's standing there mocking us. But the truth was clear to anyone watching closely. He wasn't mocking. He was waiting. A crystal flute clinked against its tray, too sharp for an accident. The young server's hands were shaking now. He shifted his weight, eyes darting from Charlotte's fury to Darius's stillness. Finally, he set the tray down on a side table and slipped his phone from his pocket. The red light glowed, a witness was born. Gasps fluttered through the room. Some guests noticed, some pretended not to, but silence could no longer contain the storm. From the far side of the ballroom, a guest in a navy tux whispered, "This doesn't feel right." His wife nodded, fingers brushing the pearls around her neck. A young woman in blush, the same investor who had spoken before, took one step forward, courage rising with each beat of Charlotte's rage. She raised her voice. "He doesn't look guilty. He looks calm. Why are you treating him like a criminal?" Charlotte spun toward her, outrage blazing. "Stay in your lane. You don't know who you're defending." The investor's chin lifted. "Maybe I do, and maybe that's exactly why I'm speaking." A ripple ran through the ballroom, the first sign that the Whitmore's grip was slipping. Edward scoffed, trying to regain ground. "You've been fooled by his act. This is what they do, stand tall, pretend, until someone exposes them." His words dripped venom, and yet his eyes betrayed unease. Gregory slammed his glass down, crystal shattering against the oak floor. "Enough chatter! Officer, control this room! Remove him now before this spectacle ruins our family's name." But the room was already changing. The young server's phone rose higher, capturing the patriarch's fury, Charlotte's shrill accusations, and Edward's sneers. Guests around him whispered, emboldened by the act of quiet rebellion. Another voice broke through, an older man near the champagne tower. "I've attended Whitmore galas for 20 years. I've never seen you humiliate a guest like this." Charlotte's eyes widened, the edges of her power fraying. "He's not a guest. He's a thief." But the claim no longer landed with certainty. It trembled in the air, weakened by doubt and recorded proof. Darius hadn't spoken, hadn't moved, but the room was no longer theirs. His silence had spread, shifting the spotlight from accusation to accusers. The chandelier sparkled above, its light less celebratory now, more judicial, illuminating every word, every gesture, every ugly truth. The witnesses had stepped in. And the trial the Whitmores thought they controlled was no longer theirs to command. The murmurs swelled into a low tide that even the chandeliers couldn't silence. For the first time, the Whitmores felt their grip slipping. And when men like Gregory Whitmore sensed control drifting, they didn't yield, they struck harder. He stepped into the center of the ballroom, the spotlight finding him by instinct, as though the room itself had been trained to obey. His voice carried with the same authority that once signed billion-dollar contracts, but tonight it reeked of fear disguised as fury. "This man doesn't belong among us," Gregory declared, his silver hair catching the golden glow. "We open our doors to visionaries, partners, families who respect legacy. Not imposters, not parasites." The word hung heavy. Parasites. The kind of insult that doesn't accuse, it erases. Charlotte seized the opening, her gown sweeping across the floor as she closed the distance to Darius. "Do you see his silence?" she cried, gesturing to him as if he were Exhibit A in her trial. "That's not dignity, that's guilt. He can't even defend himself." "A." Her voice broke, not from weakness but from the desperation of a performer losing her stage. Edward followed, laughter spilling out like poison. "Calm, still, silent, that's the act. I've dealt with hustlers all my life. Dress them up, give them a stage, and they'll fool anyone who isn't paying attention. But not us. He's a fraud, and this room will remember it." Several guests recoiled at the venom. Others looked down at their shoes, unwilling to meet Darius's eyes. But just a few watched with growing disgust at the Whitmore's performance. The young server's phone caught every syllable, every sneer. Gregory leaned closer, lowering his voice into something far more dangerous than a shout. "Men like you, standing in rooms like this, it never lasts. Wealth belongs to those who built it. We are the legacy. You are a shadow." The insult was surgical, cold, calculated, rooted not in evidence but in centuries of entitlement. And still, Darius didn't flinch. The stillness unsettled them. His refusal to break left their words echoing back, louder than intended, uglier than they imagined. The investor in blush shifted uncomfortably, but didn't back down. She whispered to the man beside her, "They're digging their own grave." The chandeliers glittered like a jury box above, each crystal shard refracting the scene into fragments of truth. The Whitmores thought they had caged him with accusations. What they hadn't realized was that their own words were the bars, and the world was beginning to see who was really trapped. The ballroom air snapped taut, stretched so thin it felt ready to tear. Gregory's insult still lingered shadow, but Charlotte wasn't finished. She lunged forward, hand outstretched, fingers clawing toward Darius's jacket pocket. Gasps erupted as her diamond bracelets clinked under the chandelier. "Enough waiting," she barked. "If no one else will do it, I will." Oh, her palm struck fabric. The crowd recoiled. Even the officer froze, stunned that the heiress herself had crossed into assault. Edward grinned, feeding on the chaos. "Go on, Charlotte. Show them who we really island." The young server's phone trembled, but it kept recording. Every guest within view knew this clip wouldn't stay hidden. Darius didn't move. His chest rose once, steady as stone. His eyes lowered to Charlotte's hand, gripping his lapel, not with fear, not with shame, but with the kind of stillness that speaks louder than protest. The investor in blush stepped forward. "Stop! You can't just put your hands on him." Her voice cracked but carried, sharp against the velvet air. Charlotte snapped back. "Stay silent if you value your seat at this table." But the table was no longer hers to control. The officer finally reached in, prying Charlotte's hand away, his face pale. "Miss Whitmore, this isn't procedure. You can't—" Gregory cut him off, voice booming. "She is the victim. Don't lecture us about procedure. Do your duty." And then Edward, drunk on arrogance, raised his hand to signal the staff. "Escort him out. Now. Drag him if you must." The words hit the ballroom like a gavel. Security guards stationed near the doors began moving forward. Guests parted, forming an unwilling corridor of shame. Some turned their faces away. Others lifted their phones higher. The hum of recordings grew louder than the music ever had. Darius exhaled, a breath so measured it unsettled those closest to him. For 38 years, silence had been forced upon him on sidewalks, in boardrooms, in places where respect was rationed out like privilege. Tonight, his silence was chosen, and it was ending. Charlotte's tiara gleamed as she spat the final command. "Get him out of our ballroom. He doesn't belong here." Oh, the chandelier above flickered, as if the crystals themselves had shuddered. And in that moment, every guest knew this was no longer a party. It was an execution staged under chandeliers. What they didn't know was that the man they tried to erase had already prepared the verdict. The guards closed in, heavy shoes echoing against polished oak. Charlotte's voice hissed behind them. "Yes, that's right. Drag him out. Let everyone see what happens when pretenders step into our world." But before a single hand touched him, Darius moved. Not frantic, not defensive, just one slow, deliberate gesture. He reached into his jacket, controlled, measured, and pulled out a phone. The guards froze mid-step, the crowd gasping as if the device were more dangerous than a weapon. Darius pressed one button, lifted the phone to his ear, and spoke with the clarity of a man who had rehearsed this moment in silence. "Rachel," he said evenly, his voice steady enough to slice through the noise, "activate the claws." The ballroom hushed. The guards exchanged glances, uncertain whether to proceed. On the other end, a woman's voice rang clear, amplified by the room's unnatural quiet. "Understood, Mr. Cole. Do you want full termination?" A chill swept the room. A few guests blinked, realizing they had just heard a name, Mr. Cole. Darius's eyes didn't leave Gregory as he answered. "Yes. Effective immediately. Cancel the Whitmore deal." It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The words landed like a gavel, final and irreversible. Phones lowered mid-recording, guests whispering in frantic confusion. Cancel the deal? The $900 million deal? Gregory's face blanched, his silver mask cracking. What are you saying?" Darius lowered the phone, the chandelier's glow catching the sharp lines of his jaw. His silence stretched just long enough to remind them who had really been on trial. Rachel's voice returned, calm as law itself. "Confirmation sent. All contracts nullified. The Whitmore family no longer holds active standing with Cole Global. Effective this minute." The investor in blush gasped audibly. her hands covering her mouth. "I knew it," she whispered. The guards halted where they stood, the authority they thought they held evaporating into the charged air. Charlotte stumbled back, tiara trembling on her head, her certainty collapsing. "No, no, this isn't real. He can't, he's nobody." But the ballroom already knew better. Darius Cole had spoken, and with one command, centuries of entitlement had been cracked open beneath a chandelier of glass and gold. For a long moment, no one breathed. The words still echoed, "Cancel the Whitmore deal," and the chandelier light seemed to sharpen, cutting across faces pale with realization. Gregory's mouth opened, then closed, his authority hanging in tatters. "This is madness," he stammered, his voice stripped of its former thunder. You have no right." Darius lifted his head, the calm in his eyes now unmistakable power. When he spoke, it wasn't loud. It was deliberate, weighted, every syllable measured like a verdict. "You just accused the man funding your empire of theft." Gasps rippled through the ballroom, a wave rolling from table to table. Phones tilted higher, guests leaning in, desperate not to miss a single word. Darius continued, his voice steady, unyielding. "I am Darius Cole, CEO of Cole Global, principal investor in the Whitmore deal, and as of this moment, your $900 million lifeline no longer exists." The chandelier refracted the scene into fragments, Gregory's face draining white, Charlotte clutching her tiara as if it could shield her, Edward stepping back like the floor itself had betrayed him. One guest near the champagne tower whispered what everyone else was thinking: "He owns the deal. He owns them." The officer who had nearly searched Darius lowered his hand entirely, shame flickering across his face. His posture shifted not toward accusation, but toward respect. Charlotte's protest broke, shrill and unconvincing. "No, no, you're lying. He's bluffing." But Rachel's voice still echoed faintly from the phone in his hand. "Contracts terminated. Market alert sent. All parties notified." The investor in blush stepped forward, her confidence now certain. "He's not bluffing. That's Huey Island." A murmur swelled into open conversation, fragments carrying through the air. Darius Cole. Forbes cover. Cole Global owns half the skyline. Darius didn't need to move. The room had shifted without him. He simply stood anchored beneath the chandelier, his silence now transformed, not a shield, but a sword. Gregory stumbled, his voice cracking. You can't do this! You'll ruin everything!" Darius's gaze cut straight through him. "No, you did that the moment you mistook silence for weakness." The line landed with surgical precision, and the ballroom erupted, phones flashing, voices rising, the tide of power now irreversible. The silence shattered not with music, not with speeches, but with chaos. Guests surged into motion, whispers colliding into open declarations. "He's Cole Global. That's the man who owns 3 skyscrapers downtown." They tried to humiliate him in his own deal. Phones lifted higher, angles catching Charlotte's trembling hands, Edward's stunned expression, Gregory's face collapsing under the weight of truth. The young server's live stream spiked in viewers, the comment feed racing faster than his hands could hold steady. The caption he typed trembled but clear. "Whitmore family just accused their own investor of theft. Live." Charlotte staggered back, clutching her gown like it might keep her dignity from slipping through her fingers. "This isn't happening," she whispered, though the cameras had already immortalized it. Gregory tried to summon his old authority, slamming his palm on the table, crystal shards still glittering from his earlier outburst. "Enough! Everyone put your phones away. This man is a liar." But the room no longer obeyed him. The investor in blush raised her voice, steady as stone. "No. You are the liars. We all saw it. We heard it. You humiliated him without proof, without reason. And now the world is watching." Applause broke tentative at first, then swelling. Guests who minutes earlier had been complicit now stood taller, clapping not for spectacle, but for justice unfolding in real time. Edward's jaw clenched, his bravado crumbling. He muttered through gritted teeth, "You'll regret this." Darius finally shifted, his gaze cutting to Edward. "Regret? No, this is accountability, something your family has never learned." The line drew another wave of applause, louder, firmer. Phones tilted, flashes sparking like lightning against the chandelier. The officer who had nearly searched him now bowed his head, shame burning in his posture. He stepped back fully, as if retreat itself were the only apology he could offer. Gregory's hands shook. His empire had been built on intimidation, on words that bent rooms to his will. But tonight, under chandeliers and cameras, those words had turned to ash. The applause thundered louder, a verdict that drowned the last remnants of his power. And at the center of it all, Darius Cole didn't need to raise his voice, didn't need to move. The room had already crowned him, not with tiaras or lineage, but with undeniable authority. The Whitmores had tried to stage his humiliation. Instead, they had orchestrated their own downfall. The applause didn't fade. It rolled through the ballroom like thunder that refused to quiet. For the first time in decades, the Whitmores weren't commanding the room. They were standing trial in it. Darius raised his phone again, his posture unhurried, his expression steady. He pressed one icon, his voice calm enough to unnerve every Whitmore within earshot. Rachel, finalize termination. Freeze all Whitmore accounts tied to Cole Global. Block system access. Effective now. And confirmed, came the voice on the line. Processing. It was clinical, almost merciless in its precision. Within seconds, Gregory's phone buzzed on the table. He snatched it up, eyes widening as he read. Then Charlotte's device lit up in her clutch. Edward's pocket vibrated next. Each screen told the same story. Locked out, frozen, erased from the empire they thought untouchable. Charlotte's gasp cracked the air. No, you can't just... But she could already see it. Notifications flashing, contracts collapsing like dominoes. The market wasn't waiting. Neither was justice. Edward lunged forward, desperate. You'll ruin us. Years of work gone. Darius's gaze cut through him. I didn't ruin you. You ruined yourselves the moment you believed power gave you the right to humiliate others. End. The guests erupted again, some applauding, some simply standing in stunned silence, bearing witness to the dismantling of arrogance live and unedited. Gregory's hands shook as he gripped the back of a chair for balance. Do you understand what you're doing? His voice was hoarse, stripped of the confidence that once filled boardrooms. Yes, Darius replied, calm as stone. I am holding you accountable, something no one in this room has ever dared to do. The words rang against the chandelier like a verdict etched into crystal. The young server's live stream exploded in viewership, comments racing across the screen. Justice served. This is history. They messed with the wrong man. Gregory tried one last desperate plea, voice cracking. You can't erase a family like ours. Darius's eyes narrowed, his reply sharp, unyielding. Watch me. The ballroom gasped, the final nail driven into the Whitmores' legacy. And as Rachel's confirmation echoed through the line, termination complete, the last shred of their control dissolved under the weight of a man they had tried to dismiss. The ballroom was no longer a ballroom. It was a courtroom, a theater, a reckoning. Phones stayed high, recording every heartbeat, every shattered illusion. Gregory slumped into his chair, pale and trembling. Charlotte stood frozen, her tiara tilted like a crown stripped of meaning. Edward's fists clenched at his sides, rage fighting with helplessness. But the room belonged to someone else now. Darius Cole stood beneath the chandelier, unshaken, his voice low but carrying through every corner. You tried to put your hands on me. You called me a thief. In a room I paid for. In a deal I built. The words dropped heavy, undeniable. He paused, letting silence stretch long enough for the humiliation to sink in. Guests shifted in their seats, not from discomfort with him, but from the reflection of themselves, complicit too many times before. I don't need to shout for justice, Darius continued. His eyes swept the crowd, steady, unyielding. I sign it, and tonight I've signed the end of the Whitmore Empire. The line landed like a blade. Phones flashed brighter, guests erupting in applause, not polite, not hesitant, but thunderous, a wave that shook the glassware and rattled the air. Charlotte's tears streaked her makeup, her voice breaking into fragments. You'll regret this. Darius cut her off, his tone sharp enough to silence the chandelier itself. No, you'll remember this. The applause swelled louder, drowning her protests. The young server who had filmed it all lowered his phone, eyes wide. He whispered to no one in particular, "This is what justice looks like." Darius straightened his jacket, the fabric crisp under the golden glow. He didn't look back at the Whitmores. He didn't need to. Their downfall wasn't in his words anymore, it was in the silence that followed, the witnesses who would carry the story far beyond the ballroom. As he walked toward the doors, guests parted. forming a corridor of respect. Some clapped, some whispered his name like a mantra. Others simply stepped aside, heads bowed, acknowledging a power that didn't need crowns or chandeliers to shine. At the threshold, Darius turned once more, his voice calm, final. You mistook silence for weakness. That was your last mistake. The doors opened, and he stepped out. Behind him, the applause roared like judgment made flesh.